to call new elections that will take place on the 17th of June. Now, Greece faces weeks of instability and threatens once again to plunge Europe into a new crisis. My guest today is Fani Podimata. She's the Vice President of the European Parliament. She was born in Athens and she's a member of the Greek Socialist Party. Mrs. Podimata, thank you for joining us. We want to know, of course, whether your country has become ungovernable. You will tell us in more details. But first, the situation seems very difficult. As I said before, there will be new elections. This because no consensus was reached following the previous elections. Who is responsible for the deadlock?
First of all, I would like to express my regret for the fact that the political leaders have not been able to reach an agreement and form a coalition government, because this was clearly the mandate sent by the Greek voters during the elections of the 6th of May. And it is also, if I'm allowed to say, a lack of responsibility and maturity from some political leaders, at least, to take the mandate of the Greek voters and form a coalition government. You know that the situation is, as you described it, very difficult. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of populism during the pre-electoral campaign that took place in Greece. And my first conclusion is that if there is a lesson to learn from the previous election, is the fact that we could and we should most probably have avoided the elections in this crucial period of time.
Mrs. Podimata, when you say a lack of maturity on behalf of some parties, I guess you're pointing the finger at Alexis Tsipras, the leader of Syriza. This is a new left-wing party which is anti-austerity, which wants to renegotiate the bailout. But they tell you it's your mistake, it's the mistake of the traditional parties who put this country into this mess.
I clearly agree, I certainly agree that among the messages sent by the Greek voters was the expression of anger, the expression of disregard towards the dominant political system. That means mainly the two political parties that have governed Greece so far.
To better understand where things stand nowadays, let's watch our report.
A transitional cabinet of technocrats and diplomats has been sworn in Greece. Their sole task, to steer the debt-ridden Eurozone state into repeat elections on the 17th of June. Panayotis Pikramenos, a former judge, will lead them as Greece's interim prime minister. It's all a compromise. After 10 days of negotiations failed to produce a coalition government, Pikramenos is under no illusions.
This is a difficult job at a difficult time. This will be just a caretaker administration.
Greece returns to the polls in 1 month's time, and analysts are predicting a big win for Syriza to consolidate its breakthrough in the last election. The radical leftist bloc is set to take the biggest share of seats in parliament. Syriza has risen in popularity thanks to its anti-austerity stance.
The people will now have their say again, so that the country can have a left-wing government that will annul this bailout agreement, which brings poverty and bankruptcy, and that will lead the people safely out of the crisis.
Worrying words for the IMF. It's decided to suspend all contact with Greece until the parliamentary elections and a new government is formed. Without the EU-IMF bailout money, Greece will default on its debt and could be forced out of the Eurozone.
As we saw, the elections which took place on the 6th of May saw the rise of so-called anti-austerity parties. It's the case with Syriza, but also with other parties. Where do we go next? Because the risk really is that on the 17th of June, these parties will gain even more momentum. Now, these are parties which want to renegotiate the bailout that was agreed, to which creditors say, well, you can do this, but then we will cut your credit lines.
I'm sure that this time the voters will be much more aware of the challenges of the dilemma that lie ahead of us. And we have to make a clear distinction between political positions and populism, as I pointed out before, because as you can imagine, nobody is in favor of austerity. What we're saying, what the socialists were saying from the very beginning, and have assumed also, as you know, the responsibility to deal with the crisis in 2009, is that austerity on its own, just austerity, cannot work because it's not efficient in creating a way out of the crisis. What we were saying from the very beginning is more or less what the President of the French Republic, François Hollande, the newly elected, points out, that we need to combine austerity measures, fiscal adjustment measures, with measures promoting, encouraging creation of jobs and development and growth.
In retrospect, was it a mistake to sign the bailout deal under the terms that were imposed on Greece at the time? I remind our viewers that it was George Papandreou who signed the deal. Was it a mistake?
Well, I'll tell you very clearly my position. I think that at the moment that the crisis collapsed, erupted, neither we, Greek authorities, neither our European partners were fully aware of the characteristics, the extent of the crisis, and most importantly, of the means, the tools to deal with the crisis. The European Union, the Eurozone, had no mechanisms to deal with such a crisis because all the architecture of the Eurozone, and I would even say of the European Union, was an architecture with a lot of deficiencies. If you ask a country to proceed in a fiscal adjustment and in a so ambitious fiscal adjustment in such a short period of time, then you risk to create the conditions for failure, as it was the case with the deeper than expected recession, which was created in Greece, and lack of trust from the financial markets.
The rise of anti-austerity parties, if I can call them this way, does it mean that an increase